Welcome back to Shades of View, Episode 3, sponsored by the Blanchard Institute. I am Kenya Ross, one of the clinicians here at the Blanchard Institute, and Michael True, the
Yep.
Withdrawal Management Coordinator. We have our first guest today, who is Mika, who is our Client Services Coordinator. We're going to pick up where we left off with a very loaded question that Mike posed to me. What would I like to see regarding the culture and as far as substance use and mental health? And we brought Mika in because Mika is highly integral part of the Blanchard Institute, as well as in the community, also Black women like myself, and we wanted to make sure we brought in different perspectives. So we wanted to give an opportunity for her to give her perspective and kind of have an open dialogue and an open discussion. So we will allow Mike to reiterate his question, and then we'll go over to Mika and let her kind of discuss her standpoint, and we'll all chime in, and we would love to hear your feedback. So let's just get started with that question, Mike, if you want to pose it again, and we'll let Mika chime in, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So again, I'm Michael True, Withdrawal Management Coordinator here at the Blanchard Institute. I work very closely with Mika, and growing up and especially recently in the last few years in this field, I've had the pleasure of being around some very strong Black women who are, I think, a very pivotal who are in a very pivotal role in this industry and in this community. And I think so. Coming from obviously my different cultural background, I think it's very good to get some of the different cultural, not only perspective but also input on kind of moving forward and how we can continue to improve the industry and in society as a whole based on.
Well, hello, fam. First of all, it's hard to sit up here and be so straight laced with you guys because I know you so well. In full disclosure to our vast audience, we kind of started this conversation a week or so ago, just shooting the shit like we typically do. Um, and yes, I'm of the culture. I've been at Blanchard a little over 3 years. And it's our cup runneth over for the people, right? It's a pleasure to help, not to see them have to come in, but to be of service to them, right? And also you begin to see the disparity, the racial disparity, the of who's walking through that door. And I get posed some questions from our clients too. A lot of them pull me to the side and it's like, I don't see very many of us, like what does that mean, right? Sort of what you would call like Kenya, like kitchen table talk. And just want to know like what meaning the question is saying like I don't see very many of us. What does that mean for our experience here? Is somebody gonna get me? Like Ward always says, people want to know that me too. I get you. I see you, right? And so that's always a concern. So posing that question, like, what can we do? I think it starts with curiosity. A lot of people don't know. And if you don't know, I'm sorry, Erica's over here, and I know her too, so my head is going like this and that. Listen, y'all. Hey.
It's episode 3. We're learning.
So, what don't you know? So, curiosity. And I would say people think big and I have to do something massive. And no, it starts small. Let's go back. Let's go back to like in school. If you're seeing children, the news stories where the kids aren't having their lunch and they're not eating, then what do you think that means for their mental health? What do you think that means for their future? When they get to that point to where it's the substance use and all that, how if they can't get lunch, if they're eating at school, if that's their one meal a day, and teachers are packing their lunch, their book bags to go home because they know, then what do you think that means when it's time for them to get some support like this? A lot of them don't even know that a door like this exists, let alone be able to walk through it, right? So curiosity, like look around, getting us in the room. You know, if you don't have people in the room, if everybody in the room looks like you're going to get the same view. And if you get in the same view, then there's no growth, there's no change, there's no, there's no support for others. So having people in the room of all shades and creeds and sexual orientations, because it's not just a racial disparity, it's disparity all around, right? So getting people in the room and asking questions and being safe. The other side of it is being safe as well too, because if you're not safe, I feel like, Mike, Erica, like we're in a position to where you guys can come to me and ask questions that you may not feel safe with somebody else. And I know you guys, I love you guys. I'm coming, and I know you're coming from a place of just care, you know what I mean? And uncertainty. It's mixed together, right? So, and being able to have those conversations and just being real and saying this is what we need and what does that, how can we move forward with those little steps, to help somebody financially, because it's a big factor. I don't want to do too much talking. Let's
No, that was great, Mika, and that's some of the things that we had in the discussion that we had when we were just kind of sitting back talking. And one of the things that we talked about was that curiosity and creating a safe space where people can ask questions, and the questions are giving answers that make sense. And one thing that we discussed was that no question is too small. And the important thing is what you don't know is to ask. And one example we gave was when Mike asked, we finished the podcast, and Mike asked, well, what do you want? Kenya, was that okay that I called you a black woman? What do you want me to say? And that was I received that with so much respect that he wanted to know. He, wanted to ensure that he did not offend me in any way. And that's what I think we meet by leading with curiosity, taking the time to acknowledge what I don't know and opening the door for dialogue. That's the important aspect. And as Mika was stating, just taking time to notice those small things. If you have an individual who, has a child or has a loved one and you notice certain things, leading with curiosity, I noticed that. Why is that? That seems out of the ordinary. And taking the time to have that compassion to open the dialogue and have a conversation, we have to begin to realize that there is a disparity, that there is a difference, and that in the room where decisions are being made, there's not a chair filled with people or filled with individuals that represent everyone. And as you stated, it's not just about skin color or ethnicity. It's also about gender biases. It's also about socioeconomics. There needs to be a chair at the table for every individual. There needs to be representation so that every voice is heard. Yep. I mean, I know, Mike, you were eager to have this conversation because I feel, just from my interactions with you, that you realize that there's such a disparity. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know you wanted to chime in on this and give your feedback.
Yeah. I mean, so I wouldn't say it obviously wasn't, Summerfield, North Carolina, where I grew up, was not the most diverse place on the planet. But we had a new high school open up that I actually went to, and it was actually pretty ethnically diverse, I would say. There was a pretty good makeup. So I grew up and had friends of all different races, cultures, and growing up and again, going down the path that I went down and having some friends go down the same one or different ones, whatever it was, I've seen kind of the differences, not only in terms of the treatment offerings, but even just inside households, kind of the differences of like, the awareness of the treatment options and the financial disparities and things like that. So I've always found it pretty interesting because I feel like a lot of it, and you touched on it a good bit, a lot of it comes from, and not necessarily like a malicious ignorance, but just like the lack of awareness ignorance, right? And so I think being confident and strong enough in your right, like so someone who's ignorant of things innocently, they just just lack of awareness. Being able to, and this goes back to the first episode when we talked about just being open to hearing feedback about stuff, like being open to someone making you aware of a certain situation, right? It's not necessarily a personal attack or an attack on your business or whatever it is. If someone just brings something to your attention, and I thought about this the other day, where it's there's ignorance and then there's prejudice, right? And so I think ignorance comes from the lack of knowledge or the lack of awareness, and then prejudice comes in when you're fully aware and you're still making the same decisions. You know what I mean? And so I think having these conversations with the people in charge, whether it's at work, at school, wherever it is, just having that conversation and bringing it to their attention of, especially nowadays, right? I mean, it's like you said, it's not just race, it's not just black and white, it's race, it's culture, it's religion, it's sexual identity, it's all these things. And I think, race is always the big one because it's a very common thing and it's visible, but there's a lot of that. There's a lot of the differences that aren't seen in the different social groups that aren't advocated for because simply for the lack of awareness and the lack of knowledge for the other sides, I guess you could say.
Well, it's a charged subject, right? So, and you just said it. So you have there's the prejudice that comes with the bias, right? And then there is just the ignorance of the unknown, the not knowing. And so there's two different things, and so taking that away, because there's no shame with it. I don't have the handbook on everything. I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers. We're not a monolith. You know what I mean? You just said, how do you want to be, called? Some people want it, African American is cool with them. Some people, I can't speak for everybody, So there's that. And even talking on the individualized aspect, it's the same thing. We're individual. I think starting from there is what it is because there's this thing about how do black people want, how do they, and it's like we don't have all the answers to everybody's everything, right? I think just breaking it down to that human form and just saying, how do you want it? What does it look like for you, right? Is starting somewhere because you don't have to carry the whole white race on your back. And growing up, for sure, like we see the news on TV, you be like, please don't let them be black. Please don't let whoever committed this crime be black because then we gonna all have to pay for it, right? Mm-hmm. So, and especially when we're still doing first. We're still having the first of this and that, and it's still a big deal, And so there's this pressure of that I don't know about you, Kenya, but I've had to release and let go and say, this is not mine to carry, right?
Definitely.
Right? So, and then back to your friend, having the people in school, I'm sure I've heard stories, the kids coming in here and they tell the story and it's like, my black son, my black brother, my black father, my boyfriend or whoever, like they would be in jail. They would be felons. They don't have that opportunity. So legislative, judicial, we have to go back and start there. Like it goes deep. Yeah. It goes deep. It's like being humanized and being seen as like this is another the same young kid who made some really messed up choices or is not in there, all that prefrontal cortex. Theirs is just as messed up as, the white young man or, whatever. It's like giving them that same love and respect and the chance, to get it together, looking at them like they're not just the thug, So it's all over in the schools. It's, what we're taught, what we get access to, and again, not just racially. It's just the only difference is that there's still something about when somebody looks at you through the lens of being a black person, that there's a switch and a change, that I don't know, you're not necessarily worth the set. I look at you, Mike, and I'm like, you know how many of you I know that's black,
Yeah.
that are unable to get a job.
Yeah.
I think when we were having that conversation, I think one thing that we all, were kind of like, yeah, that's it, is when, me and Mika were kind of saying, take this skin off, take the gender off, take everything off, and we're all human. We're all human, and that's the one thing that I think, if we all come from that standpoint, that allows us to see each other in a different light. If you take off what you see on the outside, if you forget the gender, forget the race, forget the culture, and you see from a human standpoint, we're all human. And that allows us to see through a lens of compassion, a lens of empathy, a lens of understanding, and to lean into that. If we take that approach, that changes the game, because you're no longer allowed to walk in your isms or your biases. Because if you see a human and you're human, there's no way you can't see them the same. I think if we lean in with that, that is where we start, with that curiosity, with that, how do I see this human just as I'm human? I think that's where we start with those type of conversations. I think that's the important part.
That's where I think it gets tough though too, is because like, even, I mean, a second ago, like the legislative and all these sorts of things, but it's hard to kind of infiltrate, because, and I thought about this too, where it's like, I don't know where the switch happened. You know what I mean? Like, because growing up, especially when I was a young kid, I had no idea what race was. You know what I mean? And then I cannot think of at what point in my life, like, did it flip? You know, and I don't know if it's just when I became like conscious and aware of, and have the news on in the background. And I mean, because that's obviously another thing, the media and the music and all this stuff influences what we think and stuff. But I think that's the challenge, is getting it and spreading this type of education and this awareness to households, I guess you could put it. Like, because if people are already like watching the news, or they're already 25 years old, and they've already been kind of, I can't think of a better word, but indoctrinated with this type of biases, or they've just had these subconscious biases implemented in them in whatever way. It's almost like we need to catch it before that happens. You know what I mean? Even similarly with, like, there's just the substance use awareness. Like, we used to do college students, and then we used to do high school students. Now we're going to middle schools. You know what I mean? Like, we need to get it before it happens, rather than wait until it happens and then try to correct it. And I think that's the tricky part, and that's where it's like, how can we do that?
Mike always tends to lead us into the next episode. He has a knack for doing that.
But it drives me nuts. I can't, because I get on a tear, but I want to, like, get to it. You know what I mean? Because I feel like there's so many, and I know we talked about this before we did this, where it's like, we wanted this to be like very solution focused. And it's like, I wish there was just like here's how to do it. You know what I mean? And here's how to just fix it. And in 3 months, it'll, next thing you know, it's, when you walk in the doors, it's all colors and everything. It's just
90 days. No.
Come on.
I would say, but back to our original, like, what can we do just in terms of like substance use, mental health? How can we support? I mean, really, it's the haves helping the have-nots. It's the haves coming in. One of the most beautiful things to see is when these clients come in, and when you talk about a switch, when the switch happens to where it's just me focused, to where they're service focused, right? It's one of the most beautiful things, and it's when you know, there we go. When they've taken the lens just off of themselves and put it outward. And so, and one thing about people in recovery is that there's this there's this brother and sisterhood, there's this bond, there's this that you cannot, I mean, all the AA, I mean, it's respectful. I mean, they're really like we don't do that. Like we don't cross the line. It's sacred, right? And so if you take that again, I say look to your left and look to your right. Who are you seeing? If you're not seeing, because it ain't just white people that's having the issue. No. So if you're not seeing enough of the others, right? Then it's like, okay, where do we need to go to reach them? Because they're not getting the support. They're not getting the help. They don't even know that, again, these doors exist, right? There's no clue. So meet with the local, there's some great groups, that, the Black fathers who are out there, and they're trying to ward off, the young kids. Because you said what happens is your cute little friends in elementary school and middle school become high school kids, and all of a sudden they go from being cute little boys to being grown men and thugs. You know what I mean? That's the switch. It's up. Puberty happens. Yeah. Puberty happens, and all of a sudden they're nobody's little boy anymore. Now they're a menace to society. In a lot of cases, not all. Like we're not talking about everybody. There is no everything all the time for everybody. But that's what happens. So when you get those people to come in and go to them, they're not going to come to you because they don't know. And so make that part of the service. It's like going out to them to reach them. Connecting with those groups, those local groups, in all of your hoods, right? To say, what can we come in and do? Let us see. Because knowledge, when you know better, you do better, right? And so having that knowledge, having that understanding. Because here, I'm going to say this, again, it's not about needing a savior. We don't need y'all to, but we do need the support. We do need you to come in and say, like, that hand up. Because I'm also a big proponent for who's ready, and I know I realize it's like who's ready to come in for support, but you've got to pull the people in, and then maybe they can reach back and pull somebody else in at a later time, or whatever. But those are, again, small little things to do instead of trying to have this big picture 90-day solution view that's not realistic.
This is such a great conversation, and we made so many great, key points, and we want to keep having this conversation. We want, our viewers to chime in. We want to hear, your feedback. We want to know if there's something else you want to hear us discuss. If there was something that really resonated with you, we want to have your feedback. And we definitely will have Mika back, and Mike and I will definitely continue discussing this topic because it is a hot button in society right now, and we want to, I know we're not going to get a fix-all, but we want to start the conversation. So this definitely will be something that we'll continue to discuss on episode 4, but due to time constraints, and Erica is waving the red flag, we're going to end this episode. Please continue to follow us and support us. We want your feedback, and that's episode 3.
Erica's a meanie.
Oh shit. I mean, oh shoot. I'll bleep that.
Do the laugh track.